update on what we can expect for the next couple of days. Really, the short story for this is going to be strong winds tonight and a lot of precipitation over the next few days. And this may seem a little bit odd, but we're going to be primarily talking rain. So a little bit odd for early December here in the region. But snow levels are going to be pretty high. It's a lot of subtropical moisture that's going to be moving in. So some pretty mild systems are going to impact the area. So I wanted to go through some of what we could see from these storm systems and kind of just give you a little heads up on what we can expect for the rest of the week. So if you can give me about 30 seconds to a minute, we'll get started with this in full. But what I am going to show you is the plume of Pacific moisture. You can see this just wide band of moisture moving into the Pacific Northwest and coming clear across into western Montana. And this is what's going to really be our player in the weather for not just, say, the next 24 to 48 hours, but potentially the next 72 to 96 hours. So really the next 3 to 4 days, we're going to be dealing with this storm system. So like I said, if you can give me about 30 seconds, I will be just getting a couple things here set behind the scenes, and then we'll get started with this in full. All right, we're working there, and I think we are in good shape. So I know we'll get a few more people to work their way in here over the next few minutes, but if you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask those in the chat section. I'll try and answer them as we go about this update. So I do want to start off with just a look at what we're seeing currently with those conditions. We've actually been seeing temperatures rising through the evening. We saw those temperatures, especially for places like Kalispell and Missoula, earlier in the mid-30s. We're now in the upper 30s and lower 40s with scattered rain showers out there. Butte, Bozeman, 43 and 49. And you see those winds sustained around 10, I can't even talk. Sustained around 10 to 20 miles per hour. That's going to be part of our big story as we go throughout the rest of the night. But as for those temperatures, those overnight lows looking at mid to upper 30s. In many of these areas, I think we've already seen our low for tonight. Temperatures will be gradually increasing overnight as this subtropical moisture starts to filter in a little bit more. But then we get into tomorrow, and we will see a cold front moving those temperatures down. So mid to upper 30s across the area. Rain showers will be possible, especially for areas along and west of the divide. So Kalispell, Missoula, Butte will have that chance for a little bit of rainfall tonight. And then we get into tomorrow, and it's pretty much the same, though we will likely see at least a chance for a little bit of rain and snow over towards Bozeman. These temperatures, 44, 45, 43, and 47, for Kalispell, Missoula, Butte, and Bozeman, these are likely going to be morning/midday type of highs, as we are going to have that cold front passing through, and that's going to keep those temperatures stable, if not bring them down a few degrees as we go throughout the day. But it isn't going to get significantly cold. We're just going to see those just gradually falling into the next couple of days. But even with that cold front for Tuesday, we're going to be still looking at temperatures for most areas between 10 and 20 degrees above average Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. All week is going to be quite mild across the region. Bozeman, for example, we're looking at temperatures in the low 50s Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and that's where we could see temperatures even warmer than 20 degrees above average. And like I was mentioning before, this is all due to some deep subtropical moisture that's moving in. Again, you see this pretty wide band of moisture stretching roughly 200 miles in width right here, if not even a little bit more than that, between 200 and, say, 300. Actually, I think I can ruler this out. I forgot I have this tool. So from just up here at the top, so it's actually way wider than I thought. But like just in the core of this moisture, we're talking roughly 600 miles. I was way underestimating what that was. But that plume of moisture that's just moving right into the Pacific Northwest and all the way across into the Idaho Panhandle, western Montana, this is going to be bringing some significant moisture with it. And I want to read directly from the forecast discussion earlier today from the National Weather Service in Missoula, because there's some interesting information with this. And as it says, I'll spin this camera back around. A significant, potentially historic, long-duration atmospheric river event has begun to impact the northern Rockies. A deep plume of subtropical moisture is surging into the region this afternoon. This was at just before 3 o'clock this afternoon, continuing in waves through at least Thursday. Before warm air moves in tonight, snow will fall at pass level, which we have seen up around 5,000 feet. As that warm air moves in, which it is already doing, snow levels will rise to near 7,000 feet later on tonight, so above almost all of our passes. For example, Lost Trail Pass, which is the highest in western Montana, sits at 7,014 feet. All the rest of our passes are below that 7,000 foot mark. So this is all going to be, at least for a period of time, it's all going to be rain for our passes. But continuing on with the discussion in there, the amount of moisture carried by the system is forecasted to be near all-time maximums for early December, essentially directing a fire hose of warm subtropical air into western Montana and north central Idaho. This setup is expected to produce 4 to 8 inches of rainfall over the higher terrain of north central Idaho and northwest Montana, and potentially 2 to 4 inches in the valleys by Thursday morning. Now, I think for most of western Montana, we aren't going to be looking at valley rainfall of 2 to 4 inches, but some isolated places, looking towards Libby, Troy, Trout Creek, Knox, and Heron, maybe even over towards Kalispell and into the Flathead Valley. I think most areas, we're probably talking maybe 1/10 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch, and I'll show you that rainfall map just a little bit more, but really I think our mountains, that's where we're going to see some problems, especially into northwest and like the northern parts of west central Montana, because again, we're talking 4 to 8 inches, potentially as high as say 6,000 to 7,000 feet. And when that happens, and they mention this here as I continue on, by Thursday morning, a critical threshold that significantly increases or heightens the risk of flooding. The primary concern is not just the heavy rain, but the rain on snow effect. The warm nature of the system will likely melt existing low and mid-elevation snowpack, combining runoff with rainfall to rapidly swell creeks, streams, and rivers. Residents in steep terrain and near waterways should prepare for significant rises and potential flooding. So this is verbatim directly from the National Weather Service here in Missoula. So that's really kind of the story that we're going to have to be just watching for the next few days and see how this all plays out, because there is just going to be a lot of moisture that's going to set up into the area. One other note that they make that I think is important, even for areas that may not see quite as much rainfall, just with that all essentially coming down the mountain and into our valley areas, is that minor flooding in urban and poor drainage areas are possible. Storm drains and ditches may become clogged with debris. You may preemptively want to shovel snow away from your homes, and also watch your basements for moisture intrusion. So that's, again, not something that we normally start talking about until we get to the spring, but just with how warm and how deep this moisture is going to be, it's essentially like a type of situation that we'd be talking about into, say, April, maybe even May, that we're going to be seeing in early December. So pretty abnormal for this time of the year to see this much moisture moving into the region. So that's, like I said, that's the big takeaway that I want you to have with this storm system, is we're going to be talking about that heavy rain, potential ponding on roads, some low-lying area flooding. We could be talking about some poor drainage areas dealing with flooding, those small creeks and streams with our mountains on that rain on snow situation, increased runoff. Rock slides and mudslides will also be a possibility as well. And then we have the gusty winds. That's going to be an issue as we head into tonight and tomorrow. Sustained winds 20 to 30 miles per hour with this cold front will be possible. We could be talking gusts anywhere from 35 to 50, maybe 60, 65 miles per hour across the region. We'll see that increase in certain areas. So going into the high wind warnings, the wind advisories we have, starting off with the wind advisories up here across northwest Montana. That's where we're going to be seeing sustained winds, say 15 to 25 miles per hour, gusts 30 to 40 and maybe some 45 to 50 mile per hour gusts in the higher elevations. It's as you get into the more, it's kind of more of a gold color. These are the high wind warnings for the Southern Rocky Mountain front, the East Glacier Park region, and areas east from there, as well as for the Big Belt, Bridger, and Castle Mountains, the Beartooth-Absaroka Mountains, the Livingston area, and the Madison River Valley, including places like Ennis and Cameron. These areas, we could be talking wind gusts as high as 60 to 75 miles per hour. And with these westerly winds, really travel is not going to be great for these north-south highways. So we're talking Highway 89, 287, Interstate 15, US 191. A lot of issues for some of those higher profile vehicles will be possible. And on top of that, we could even see some power outages in a few locations. Again, northwest, southwest Montana will be the focus for both of these. We could see some tree branches come down, some minor tree damage, and unfortunately, if that happens, we could see some power outages as those tree limbs start to, potentially come down if they fall on top of the power lines. And even in a few locations, if the winds get strong enough, you could actually have those power lines start arcing as they're swinging in the wind. So that'll be something we have to watch really for the rest of the night and into Tuesday morning. For most of I know for the winter or the wind advisories, those run through 11 a.m. I believe the high wind warnings, those are a little bit longer in duration. For the Livingston area, that's 11 a.m. tomorrow. The Beartooth-Absaroka Mountains, that's going to be 11 a.m. tomorrow as well. But these over into north central Montana, those linger through, say, 2 to 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So, and really as we get closer to lunchtime, the wind should slowly start to subside across the area as at least the core of the wind threat starts to push off to the east. Now getting into the wet weather side of things, like I was mentioning, high precipitation chances Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, especially for areas along and west of the Divide. Southwest Montana, I won't even say we'll likely see less precipitation from this atmospheric river. And I will say this, I know there's some, I wouldn't say controversy, but I know some people on social media like to get a little agitated by the fact that meteorologists use the terminology atmospheric river. It was actually a little bit of history about this that I think is quite interesting. It was coined by MIT back in 1994, and it actually has a designated criteria that it's used for certain just plumes of tropical moisture like this. And like I was saying, this one is certainly within the range of being considered an atmospheric river. But again, 1994 was when that terminology was coined and the first time that it was used. So not one of the older, or I'll say oldest, unique terminologies, things like bomb cyclone. That was back in the 60s and 70s. Land spout tornadoes, that's another one that I know some people get a little bit confused on why are we using these new fancy terms? Well, they're actually older terms. But like I said, in this case, the atmospheric river was first coined in 1994. If you've ever heard the term Pineapple Express, it's talking about the same thing, really, because that comes down from the tropics, down from places like Hawaii, and starts to move into the Pacific Northwest and into places like California and whatnot. So, little side tangent there, but a little bit of weather terminology history for you there. Now, like I mentioned, Southwest Montana, we're likely going to see a little bit less in the way of overall coverage, less in the way of heavy rainfall and heavy mountain snow, high elevation snow. That will start to quiet down a little bit as we get towards the end of the weekend and early next week, or into the end of this week and early parts of the weekend, though we aren't going to completely turn off the moisture. Now, because of the threat of flooding, especially into northwest Montana and the mountains of north central Idaho, including Clearwater Mountains, the Bitterroot Mountains, the Selkirk, Cabinet, Swan Range, the Whitefish Mountains, the Mission Mountains, we could be talking rainfall of, again, 4 to as much as 8 inches, and that's going to be falling on top of snow, so that's just going to run off the mountains and cause some problems. So for northwest Montana, we've got those flood watches that continue through Thursday afternoon for Lincoln, Flathead, Lake, Sanders, and Mineral counties. across our region. So I do want to jump into radar, show you a little bit of what we're seeing, and I'm going to change this view just a bit here so I can take an even wider look of just the moisture plume heading our direction. We're going to be getting less in the way of precipitation as compared to the Cascade Range, really from Seattle, Portland, areas east and west from there. Heavy rainfall, a much higher threat of flooding back over into this area. But you notice how, except for the highest peaks out here, we're talking, there's Mount Rainier down towards, say, I believe that's Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens. Up here further north as you get closer to Mount Baker. Oops, you can't see where I'm pointing. Sorry about that. Mount Baker, and then back over towards, again, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens. All of this is rain except for in those highest peaks, and that's the kind of warm air that's going to be pushing into western Montana. But as you can see, we had a little bit of a lull earlier this evening, but we're getting more of that moisture starting to pool in to the Idaho Panhandle, northwest and west central Montana's valleys. Right now, snow levels are still sitting around 6,000 feet, so it's snow in our highest elevations, but even you can see those pinks and blues starting to disappear even from the Bitterroot Range. So looking at Lookout Pass, for example, it's all rain at Lookout Pass, which is at an elevation of about 4,700 feet, and it's one of our lower passes. Same story as we head over here towards Lolo Pass, now showing up as just rain, and Lolo Pass is at 5,200 feet. So those snow levels continue to rise tonight. They will start to fall again as we head into tomorrow, but let me go back to the sweeping radar, set this to just right now, and we're seeing primarily up in the mountains, the Highway 200 corridor, where we're seeing more of that light to moderate rainfall. But you notice Kalispell, Polson, down through the Mission Valley, down into the Missoula and Bitterroot valleys, there's a decent amount of gap in that moisture. We're getting some downslope flow, a little bit of evaporation in the valleys, and that is actually going to be something that we have to watch out. I say watch out for, but that may really limit how much rain gets into places like Missoula, down towards Hamilton over the next couple of days, because if we get more of that downslope flow in those areas, we may not see quite as much in the way of moisture into the valleys as some forecast models are showing. No guarantee that it happens, but it did happen on Saturday, and that helped to limit how much rainfall made it down into places like Missoula, Hamilton, Polson, and even Kalispell to an extent as we got into Saturday morning. So that did help us out in staying at least a bit drier for the afternoon, when, like I said, we could see that again, but the mountains, it's all going to be moisture. We're not going to be seeing that rain shadow effect through those areas. So going into Future Tracker, we'll continue to see that moisture increasing tonight. Kalispell, we're likely going to see those showers start to, I'll say, reinvigorate as we get closer to midnight. You'll see this big push of moisture, and see how the returns brighten up right there. That could actually be in association with that cold front that moves through. So once that passes through, temperatures will slowly be falling, and then it continues further south through the area. That's also what's going to help to kick those winds up, initially up in northwest Montana. And once we get closer into sunrise, say 6 o'clock, I think Kalispell, we are done with the rain in the short term. Interstate 90 from Missoula back over to Butte, we'll see that rain likely into the morning commute. As we get closer to 8 o'clock, we start to see that taper off. I think Dillon, Ennis, Bozeman, for the most part, we stay dry out of this, other than a few spotty showers here and there. But see how we really push that moisture south with the cold front. Things start to clear out, rain-wise at least, as we get into Tuesday afternoon. This is going to be another break from the moisture, but watch as we go into Tuesday night. Here comes the next push of subtropical moisture with that colder air in place Tuesday night into Wednesday. Snow levels are down to, say, 3,500 to 4,000 feet. You can see how it's just these narrow areas within the valleys where we are looking at rainfall in comparison to snow. We're likely, or at least going to have the potential for another round of some travel impacts for Lookout, Lolo, Lost Trail Pass, Marias Pass, we could see some of that. And then into southwest Montana, I think this gives us our best window for some of that moisture. It's going to give us our best push to see some of that down into places like Dillon, Ennis, Bozeman, West Yellowstone, as well as into the mining city. Looking into, say, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, potentially some moderate to heavy snowfall. So we could see, again, travel impacts for our higher elevations as we get into Wednesday morning. And I wouldn't even rule out places like the Sealy-Swan Valley transitioning back over to all snow. And that could lead to some issues there. Back over towards, again, the I-90 corridor east and more likely east of Missoula as you head over towards the Bearmouth area, Clinton, Drummond. You could see those snow levels falling down enough to where we at least have a slushy mix, maybe some issues on I-90. There's still some question marks about how much cold air stays in place for Wednesday morning. But watch again as we get later into the morning. Pretty narrow. You can see pretty clearly where the valleys are, or where our lowest valleys are. The Mission, Missoula, Bitterroot Valleys, the Highway 200 corridor. But for the most part, we are seeing the blues and pinks of the mix and the snow in the mountains. Watch as we go throughout the morning, though. Those greens get wider and wider, and they start to fill in even more space. And by the time we get to 5 a.m., we may be back to all rain over here, places like Lookout Pass, Lolo Pass, and the rain just takes more and more space. By 8 a.m., we're pretty much all rain in our lower elevation areas, though. Kalispell, again, we're right on the edge of that. Can't rule out a little bit of snow maybe trying to sneak in to the Flathead Valley early, but once that by the time we get to lunchtime, other than our highest elevations, we are back to all rain. But here's where we start to see some of that downslope flow showing up here in the forecast models. You see Kalispell, we're still stuck in the rain, but Missoula, the Mission Valley, the Bitterroot Valleys, we're seeing this pretty consistent signal of downslope flow, not a lot of moisture. I'm just kind of going back and forth to show you how this could, again, impact the kind of rainfall that we see. Up towards Kalispell, we continue to see heavy rain. I mean, Libby, Thompson Falls, Trout Creek. It's going to be soggy. It could be a complete washout from Wednesday morning through Wednesday afternoon and evening. This is getting into Thursday morning, and it's still just heavy rainfall, just consistently going through these areas. Just the highest peaks along the divide seeing the snowfall. Same thing for the highest peaks down into the Bitterroot Mountains. And even into Thursday morning, we're still talking about that heavy rainfall. We get another little push to the south. This may be enough to bring some of that rain back down into the valleys, places like Polson, Missoula, down towards Hamilton. With another cold front that passes through the area, you see more of that cold air into north central Montana, and a lot of that rain transitioning back over to snow in those areas. But I think for the most part, western Montana will still be looking at rain. Most of that moisture starts to clear out once we do get enough cold air here in place, other than a few spotty showers. But a rain-snow mix as we head into Thursday afternoon and evening can't be ruled out. I didn't get the graphic that I wanted to pull up, and my system's a little unhappy with me here. Got one more graphic to show you, and then I'm going to start wrapping this up so I can get a few things finished up and ready before our live broadcast coming up here in just about 20 minutes. But I want to show you the 72-hour forecast for rainfall. And this is just one model look. Other models are a little more aggressive with our valley rainfall, but this one tends to do a pretty good job on the kind of rainfall that we do see in the valleys. And you see through Tuesday afternoon, it's picking up maybe a quarter to a half an inch of rainfall towards Kalispell. I think we're probably more in that 1/10 to a quarter of an inch of rainfall, but you see the mountains towards the Bitterroot Mountains. We've got the heavier precipitation showing up into, say, Glacier National Park, but lower amounts down in our valleys. As we get into Wednesday and that next push of moisture, that starts showing up some of that moisture into places like Dillon, Butte, Missoula, 1/10 to a quarter of an inch of rainfall. But watch how the precipitation amounts really explode here across the mountains, right along the state line into northwest Montana. As we go from Wednesday into Thursday, we see more and more of those reds, the purples, even some whites showing up here into the Cabinet Range there north of, say, Thompson Falls and the Highway 200 corridor. I know that's just one marker right there, but that goes above our scale, which is showing 6 to 7 inches of rainfall. So this is why we're a little concerned, or maybe a little more than just a little concerned, for the potential of some significant runoff coming into our creeks and streams. When we're talking 2, 3, 4, 5 inches of rainfall for our mountain areas, again, upwards as high as, say, 7,000 feet, that can cause some significant problems. In addition to all of that, we could be talking about significant avalanche problems as well, and this may be a lingering issue because of the way that we're not going to likely see a good adherence of the snow levels, because we're going to have this rain starting to melt down some of that snowfall, turning it a little bit icy. So avalanche watches and warnings are already in place for northwest Montana for conditions that are expected for tonight. I would not be surprised to see more avalanche warnings just really continuing over the next couple of days, especially as we go from this warm period behind the cold front, some heavy snowfall for a brief period of time. You get that one layer of, let's say decent snow, heavy wet snow on top of a watered down layer, and then you're going to get another layer on top of that. So you're going to have some instability in the snowpack in those mid and higher elevations that could cause some significant backcountry problems. Still, areas at 6,000 feet and higher, we could be talking about some rough conditions, like raw, wet, cold type of conditions, even as the snow levels start to rise. So a multifaceted storm system. Again, this is sort of the last call. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask those. But the key takeaways on this, we're seeing that first wave of moisture continuing to move through the area, especially for areas along and west of the divide. That cold front moves through tonight with the wind advisories in northwest Montana, high wind warnings for really north central Montana, parts of southwest Montana. We could be talking gusts as high as 35, 40 miles per hour in those advisories, and then the high wind warning 60 to maybe as high as 80 miles per hour. Tree damage, minor power outages, can't rule those out tonight. Then we get into Tuesday night and Wednesday. That next push of cold air comes through behind the cold front, brings those snow levels down to 3,500 to 4,000 feet. But as we get into Wednesday morning, snow levels start to climb back up to, say, 6,000, 7,000 feet. And that's when we could be really talking about heavy rainfall on a pretty consistent basis for 24 to 48 hours across northwest Montana, for the valleys, for the mountains as well. And that's when we could see some of the heaviest rainfall, the highest potential for some flooding, low-lying areas, higher runoff areas, and also just with the cold ground. And you may want to get your, if you have any snow close to your home, shovel that away, because that rain could run off into your basements. We don't want that to happen either. So, like I said, lots going on with the storm system, and plenty that we'll be watching over the next couple of days. But like I mentioned earlier from the National Weather Service, they did mention the potential of historic, or at least potentially historic moisture content for early December for really the entirety of the area from this atmospheric river moving through the region. So I wished I could say we were going to see lots of sunshine, maybe, and even some snow. But in this case, it's primarily going to be rain, that flooding potential, and lots of clouds. So we're in it for at least another 3 to 4, maybe even 5 days before we start to see a little bit of a change into the forecast, as it looks like right now heading on into the weekend. So thanks for spending about 20, 30 minutes of your evening with me. Thanks for tuning in, and tune into our live broadcast coming up here in 15 minutes. We'll have the latest news updates and some more of the weather updates as well. And then, of course, tomorrow morning, tune into NBC Montana Today with Jason Hurst and Chief Meteorologist Brooke Foster. And then I'll be back for tomorrow evening's shows, and depending on how things go, I might do another one of these YouTube live updates tomorrow. More likely as we head into Wednesday, as we get that second wave of moisture to roll through, but we'll go from there and see how things all play out. So have a great rest of your evening, have a safe Tuesday, and I'll see you all in the next one. With NBC Montana, I'm meteorologist Mitchell Coombs.